the Africa Center for Strategic Study roundtable this morning here at National Defense University. My name is Mark Bellamy. I'm the director of the Africa Center. It's a great pleasure to have all of you with us this morning. I hope you didn't have too many difficulties navigating your way through the gates and finding a parking place and getting into this particular outpost. Thank you all for being here. We have a very interesting program this morning on Africa's information revolution and the implications for governance and security in Africa. I think anyone who has spent time recently in Africa or worked in Africa or studied African issues is aware that Africa is experiencing an information revolution. Over the past 5 years, annual growth for mobile telephony in Africa has been about 65% annual growth, which is roughly twice the global average. And roughly a third of Africans today have cell phones. You know, I think back to 2003 when I first arrived in Nairobi as the U.S. ambassador, and one of the issues that I had to deal with, or I thought that I had to deal with, were the large number of Kenyan companies, public service companies, public utilities that were bleeding huge sums of money, that were losing huge sums of money, and amongst them was the telephone company, with 250,000 landlines, which for the most part did not work or only worked intermittently and were extremely expensive. And part of my lecturing and hectoring of our Kenyan colleagues was to do something about the telephone system, along with a number of other things. Well, 3 years later, it really didn't matter. People had sort of forgotten about those 250,000 landlines. I don't remember exactly what the number of mobile phones was in 2006, but it was well into the millions, and that issue was quickly bypassed and overcome with the sheer force of this technological change taking place in Kenya. And I'm sure it's a story that repeats itself across the continent. I think we all understand and know and have had glimpses, sometimes vivid glimpses, into the way the information revolution has changed and is changing Africa. Certainly the use of mobile telephones in Kenya and of messaging in Kenya in the aftermath of the 2007 elections, we got an indication of how mobile telephony can be used for ill or for good. We're all, I think, familiar with how the use of mobile telephones has made it easier in many places for farmers to understand what the value of their products might be, or fishermen to understand what the market price for their products might be, and how in some small way it has changed their lives. I think we're all aware of how election monitoring can be made more effective through these new means of communications. We're all aware of how responses to disasters or catastrophes can also be somehow managed more effectively through these new information systems. And I think we're all aware that in some places at least, the mobile telephones have completely transformed financial systems and have made it possible for people to conduct banking activities without actually having to deal with banks or having banks in their rural areas or in their villages. And finally, we've all had vivid illustrations in recent weeks about the power of new communications technologies across North Africa and in those areas that have experienced a sudden and sweeping political change. But I think we all know at some level that big changes are afoot in Africa, but we don't fully understand the implications of this. We understand that in some cases this is a two-edged sword, but we don't fully understand the implications for security, stability, and governance across the continent. And that's one of the reasons that we have assembled this panel this morning, and hope to begin to ask some of these questions and begin this conversation. We're very fortunate to have three distinguished experts with us today, and I will quickly introduce them before turning it over to them. Stephen Livingston, to my left, is Professor of Media and International Affairs at the School of Media and Public Affairs and at the Elliott School of International Affairs at George Washington University. He is a leading writer on the importance of media and access to information for an effectively functioning political system. And he's perhaps, I think this is accurate, best known for coining the phrase CNN effect. At least I am told that you were the author of that celebrated phrase. He's advised a wide range of governments, the UN and NGOs on matters relating to international affairs, media, technology, and public opinion dynamics. And his work has taken him to Nigeria, Iraq, Kenya, Afghanistan, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, among other places. And I'm sure that list is not exhaustive. He is also the author of the latest research paper from the Africa Center for Strategic Studies, Africa's Evolving Infosystems, A Pathway to Security and Stability. Copies of this are available on the desk just outside the door. Next to Stephen Livingston is Jonathan Gossier. He is a designer, software developer, entrepreneur, and TED Senior Fellow. He currently serves as Director of SwiftRiver at Ushahidi, which is a Kenya-based open source project which allows users to crowdsource crisis information via mobile phones. The Ushahidi platform was launched to track the violence following Kenya's elections in 2007 and 2008, and has subsequently been used throughout the world to enhance citizen engagement and oversight, including Egypt, Libya, the anti-immigration riots in South Africa in 2008, Haiti, and elsewhere. Next to Jonathan is Eric Chinje. Eric is head of the Global Media Program at the World Bank Institute, and in that capacity, he's launched the IMAGE, Independent Media for Accountability, Governance, and Empowerment Network and Academy, to build a core of development journalists in the bank's client countries. Prior to that, Eric was the External Affairs and Communications Manager in the bank's Africa region and the institution's spokesperson on Africa. And I want to thank Eric for joining this panel on short notice. I think he's just stepped off a plane, having spent the last month traveling around Africa, so perhaps, though he may be weary, we will assume that your insights are fresh. And I want to thank you, Eric, for being with us this morning. Finally, I want to just quickly mention Dr. Joseph Siegel, who is the director of our research program at the Africa Center. I don't know where Joe is sitting right here. Joe has been really the author of our research program, which has taken shape over the past couple of years and which is producing now papers and studies along the lines of Stephen Livingston's. And I told Joe I think it would probably be more appropriate for him to be at this table this morning. Maybe we'll switch places at some point, but thank you very much, Joe. I will get out of the way now, and I think our plan was for each of our panelists to talk for perhaps 10 or 15 minutes. Some of you might be using the PowerPoint, others not, and after your individual presentations, we'll open it up for discussions and Q&A. So, Dr. Livingston.